You're listening to the Uptime Wind Energy Podcast, brought to you by BuildTurbines.com. Learn, train, and be a part of the clean energy revolution. Visit BuildTurbines.com today. Now here's your hosts, Alan Hall, Joel Saxum, Phil Totaro, and Rosemary Barnes.
Welcome to the Uptime Wind Energy Podcast. I'm your host, Alan Hall, and I'm here with Joel Saxum up in the great state of Wisconsin. Phil Totaro's in California, and Rosemary Barnes is here, but she's in a vehicle in Australia somewhere. But there has been a tremendous amount of news over the last couple of days, and I think we should talk about some of them. I guess it's where the group would like to go this week, guys. You know, we've been talking about the administration for the last several weeks and about administration out. The latest is with the administration in court about Empire Wind. Do you want to even talk about that stuff this week, or do you want to move on to something that's a little happier?
Let's do happier, Alan. I think we need some different news.
I feel the same way, Joel. You know, when this podcast comes out, everybody's going to be in Husum, Germany, having a great time, talking wind energy, particularly in Europe. And it sounds like that event is going to be bonkers from what I can tell on LinkedIn.
Yeah, Husum is only second to Hamburg, right, in Germany there. And everybody that I go, they enjoy it. Husum is like the correct me if I'm wrong, Phil, but I think it was like the first place they had onshore wind in a big way in Germany.
Yes. So it's Vestas put up a factory there and was selling wind turbines to farmers. It's also where they used to do, the reason that it's there is they used to do an agriculture event. And then they used to invite some of the wind guys. This is going back to like the, late 80s, early 90s. They used to invite the wind guys, or the wind guys used to show up to try and sell turbines at this agriculture event. The amount of people interested in wind got to such an extent that they started doing a separate wind event. And it got to, before they started the separation with the Wind Energy Hamburg event, that got to a point. I mean, I remember being there in 2015 or 2016 when it had to have been 30,000 people in a field in Husum. My best memory of it, I think, was when, it was Eon at the time, but they had a guy running around passing out hot dogs, and I had a Eon hot dog.
Phil, I wanted to share with you, this was a Deutsche Wind Technique show, San Antonio, ACP. They had margaritas with the Deutsche Wind Technique logo in the margarita, like the foam on top of the margarita ones, and they were passing those out at an event. And I thought that was spot on.
The hot dogs are not branded in any way, although that would have been a good idea to stamp the bun or something.
How do we do that for weather guard at the next event? How do we have like lightning bolt popsicles or something?
Oh, I'm sure that can happen.
Lightning bolt cookies, maybe?
Well, cookies. We all love cookies. Who doesn't love a good chocolate chip cookie? You know who told me about Husum first was Lars Benson, and at AC 883. And he described it as just a complete craziness in the middle of a field. You had to go rent a house to stay there, but it was a heck of a lot of fun. And I thought, well, if Lars is having fun, it must be really fun, because Lars likes to have fun.
I used to have to take the train on a daily basis from Hamburg because there was no way you could even get a house or a hotel. It was so busy in that little town. So yeah, it was quite an experience, and they've eventually worked out all the logistics, because they used to not even have like shuttle service from the train station to the event, but there were so many people that demanded it that they started adding these kind of amenities, which was nice.
I did want to share this one. You mentioned Lars Benson, Alan. Lars and the team over at AC 883 recently. Lars stepped into the executive chair and handed over the main keys to the organization to Yannick. So Yannick Benson, the new CEO at AC 883. So a little bit of a management change up there in Canada. That company growing, selling spare parts, doing blade work, doing service work, all kinds of good things.
Yeah, if you need spare parts, you better be calling Yannick. It's spare parts are hard to get at the moment, and I know Yannick and Lars have connections in places you can't get to. So it's a good place to reach out to, AC 883. Well, just in time for Husum, the new PES Wind magazine is out. This thing is heavy. It's full of great articles, and I've been thumbing through it, recognizing a lot of people that I know in the magazine, and that's awesome. But Joel pointed out that Armando Costa Rego is in it from Arthwind. And Arthwind is we talked to Armando a couple of months ago, Joel, down in Nashville. That seems like an eternity ago.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Armando and I chat quite regularly. We're on the WhatsApp telling jokes, talking family stuff off and on. And that man is everywhere, right? I talked to him last week. He was in Mexico. He was in Chile. He was in Argentina at all the wind events. He's got Wind Power Brazil coming up. I know he's doing a big thing with the Arthwind team down there for that. He was at ACP Nashville for OMS. He was at ACP in Phoenix. It's like every event, everywhere, he's there, no matter what. Europe, South America, it doesn't matter. But yeah, the article there showcasing, of course, what Arthwind does as a blade consultant. They're top tier. They've got a large team. They have a lot of experience inside the factories, auditing blades as they're coming off the lines, internal inspections, external inspections, blade expertise. They've got their own platform, ArthNex, which is kind of it's solid, right?
It's good.
Yeah, it's good stuff for validating repairs, real-time feedback. I know they got some AI engines for chatbots and stuff in there. They're doing some really cool things. And if you've met Armando, you've probably also met our good friend Rodolfo, who is a strong right hand for Armando, and that team down there is they're doing big things in Brazil.
Yeah, a lot of great things happening at Arthwind, and they are worldwide. If you need help with inspections or technology or blade management or turbine management, Arthwind is definitely a place to check out. And you also need to check out PES Wind. So if you haven't downloaded your copy, you can go to peswind.com and download your copy today. As wind energy professionals, staying informed is crucial, and let's face it, difficult. That's why the Uptime Podcast recommends PES Wind magazine. PES Wind offers a diverse range of in-depth articles and expert insights that dive into the most pressing issues facing our energy future. Whether you're an industry veteran or new to wind, PES Wind has the high-quality content you need. Don't miss out. Visit peswind.com today. You want to talk about cables? You want to talk about storage batteries?
I think we should do the cables and batteries, but you pick the order.
Yeah, I mean, they relate. I'm sure one will flow into the other.
Well, if more things could not go wrong for Ørsted at the minute, and I know we're watching Ørsted all the time, watching the stock price, watching them get their feet back underneath them. Ørsted has a lot of projects still going on today, and I think everybody forgets about that they're a worldwide company and are doing great things all over. But they had a setback in Taiwan. So an export cable was damaged at the Greater Changhua 2B offshore wind project, which is going to push back the completion of that project to sometime in late 2026. It's about a 300 million Danish kroner hit on the revenue chain, which is about $50 million. It's not a huge deal, but when I read this article, Joel, the first thing was I thought about you saying that on offshore, the biggest risk isn't the actual turbines, it's the cable. And there's a lot of damaged cable as they're deploying them. What likely happened here in Taiwan?
Well, I think the first off, it's interesting that they're taking the hit. I think that's the headline, but that's got to be an insurance policy that's covering this. There's no way that Ørsted's covering $50 million because they should be built under construction policy. So onto the technical side of things, cables can be damaged in many ways. I mean, you can damage them loading them onto the ship. You can damage them in offloading of the ship. Failure modes are stretching, compression, bending. If you exceed a certain radius when you bend it, because remember, an export cable is going to be, I mean, half a meter across at a minimum, right? They're huge. So you even go to the point where there's a concept called touchdown monitoring. So you'll have the cable lay vessel and there's the stinger that sticks out the back, that the cable comes out of the reel and goes down the stinger. When it goes off the stinger, it cannot exceed a certain radius. And when it gets to the ground, it can't exceed a certain radius of curvature. So there'll be an ROV, a remotely operated vehicle, a camera down there flying along with the vessel to watch that radius to see how it's doing. And that's the touchdown monitoring part of it. So they know a lot of times if they're laying, if they have an issue. The trouble here is splicing a cable like that when there's a break or a problem, like it's damn near impossible. Now, the Greater Changhua project is in shallow enough water where you can put divers down. So there's a possibility of putting a bell, putting an enclosure and splicing something, but oof, that's expensive too.
But is there any suggestion that it was was it sabotage? Was it accidental? Because that's what my worry is with this happening in that region. Even if it was just one of those somewhat mundane failure modes that you described, it probably is going to bring to everybody, like, front of everybody's mind, that sabotage of a cable is a really good way to be able to take out a whole wind farm. And in that region, at least, like, they're really struggling for renewable energy solutions. And if they're not trusting in subsea cables, then, which is already problematic because a lot of the neighbors in that region don't want to be trusting each other with something as critical as electricity supply. But yeah, I think, if they have to rule out subsea cables because they're perceived security risk, or real one, then they're going down to some of the crazier options like Japan's looking at, where it's like, we're going to import liquid hydrogen, we're going to co-fire ammonia in our coal plants, all these sorts of things that just get more and more and more expensive than just putting electricity down a cable. So yeah, I just wonder if anybody's talking about the security aspect of it.
It seems that it's in construction, and when you're under construction, of course, there's going to be a ton of vessels around there. So I wouldn't suspect it was actual sabotage. I would think this is just a construction thing. And another reason behind that is in offshore construction in general, whether it's, I'm talking pipe and cable lay. In pipe and cable lay, accidents, incidents, losses happen quite regularly, really at a kind of a high rate compared to other things. So I don't think it would be a sabotage problem right now, but who knows in the future as well.
Well, I just asked ChatGPT because this is the only place I can actually find some information about it. There's really nothing online talking about what actually caused the damage in ChatGPT, as Rosemary pointed out. Got to be careful, but let me just read you what it says right now. The Changhua Telecom subsea cable was damaged earlier this year in January, and it looks like a potentially Chinese-linked ship happened to do that damage. So this sounds familiar to some things that have happened over in near Northern Europe. Sure. Yeah. Oops.
Ask ChatGPT for its source, because if you couldn't find anything on the internet, how did it? It's not like it has friends in the industry that are talking to it, So is that a hallucination that's going to start an international incident?
Yeah, you think this podcast could start an international incident? That would be interesting. That I'd want to hear. But no, it does seem like a cable was damaged earlier this year. And it wouldn't be the first time that China was involved in cable damage. And it would be normal not to talk about it if it was sabotage. So it does seem a little bit odd that you don't hear anything about it. But back to Joel's point, if it is an insurance claim, the insurance company's not going to talk about it. No, Orsa's not going to talk about it because it's under dispute, probably. But back to your comments earlier, Joel, about watching all this happen underwater and watching the cable drop. They know what the bottom of the sea looks like, where this cable is supposed to go. Haven't they removed all the big obstacles for the cable to actually lay down, or do they have a route that avoids all that?
Yes and no. So I've been watching some of the geotechnics on that in that area, and there are very difficult geotechnics. So if you remember maybe last summer, there was a jackup rig that fell over there.
Right.
Okay, so that's difficult geotechnics, right? So when you're running a geotechnical study on a cable lay route, usually it goes like this. You'll cruise down it with multi-beam echo sounders so you can see the surface, basically, so you can read what's there. Rocks, dirt, sand, whatever. And you do a wide swath. You have it covered a couple 100 meters wide, the whole route. And then along that route, you'll pick like every kilometer, this will be the spec, like every kilometer, you're going to do a core. So you're going to do a gravity core or a drilling core to get a core sample of that sediment and be able to pull it out and see, okay, what's actually here. And then every half a kilometer, you'll do like a simple vibro core or something like that, a CPT push test. But that leaves pockets, right? In this area, like when that jackup rig went over, they had done a bunch of around a site, around a actual where you put a monopile in. You're going to do a lot of surveys. You're going to do a bunch of CPTs in that area to kind of create a network of what that subsurface looks like. But you can hit gas pockets. You can hit soft soil pockets. compaction, liquefaction, different things that you didn't, because you didn't test every meter, you can hit these things, right? So there is a possibility that you're laying this cable, or in this case, it sounds like this thing may have been an anchor drag or something. But there is a possibility that you're laying this heavy cable and you're on sand, and what looks like sand, but it's actually like a liquefied sand, and all of a sudden the cable dives under the surface because that cable's heavy and a lot of pressure on it. So that can happen without you knowing, and that's why you're doing the touchdown monitoring and all those kind of things.
So is this similar to when you watch LinkedIn and you're putting in a monopile and it just keeps going?
Yeah, that's the exact same thing. When you're like, do, they get through a hard surface, also flump, and it's just gone. Yeah.
Insurance is obviously going to be a part of this. The bigger conversation on insurance, however, that's triggered by stuff like this is, at the end of the day, the developer puts, in this case, Ørsted, they put a modest amount of margin into their budget when, they go and ask for capital. When you get some kind of a delay, whether it's, induced by a government shutdown or, an incident with a cable, whatever the cause is, the reality of that is you're going to blow through your management reserve in like a week or maybe a month. And you've got very tight margins already, and you're setting yourself up for a money-losing project if you can't make sure that you leverage all these technologies Joel just explained. They've already started increasing premiums and decreasing terms for insurance policies, whereas they might have signed like a 3-year or a 5-year term on a policy. Now they're only signing a 1-year term, and they're increasing premiums by at least 20% from what I've understood from folks in the insurance industry. So, things like this, again, whatever the cause of the cable cut, having those kind of challenges makes it definitively more expensive for all of us, because at the end of the day, we as electricity ratepayers have to buy this electricity from whatever the power generation source is, and we're the ones that pay off that project. And, if a developer's not able to make money on a project, they're not going to build a project.
So, Rosemary, with those kind of things in mind, have you heard of any of the site suitability, subsea, subsurface studies going on in the offshore wind projects in Australia?
Yeah, not so much. All I have heard about is just that the water is very deep. For the most part, it drops off quickly across most of Australia. So that's why they're already even looking at some floating offshore wind projects in Australia, which is kind of crazy because we've got so many like amazing onshore sites left, including some with with potential capacity factors in the high 40s. So it's like that's as good as an offshore wind site, but it's cheap like an onshore wind site. So yeah, so that's a bit crazy. And also just I've been following the progress of the Sun Cable project, so it's not offshore wind, but it's a big cable that they're planning to put in between Darwin and Singapore via Indonesia. And I just have been looking, keeping an eye on it over the last, I don't know, like 5 more years, probably nearly 10 years by now. And the length of the cable has grown and grown and grown as they understand more and more accurately what the route is actually going to be. So obviously they have to go around some obstacles, and it's adding, hundreds of kilometers every time that they have to do something like that. So I don't think it's super easy. But there are plenty of offshore gas exploration in parts of Australia, so I'm sure that those parts at least are well understood. And
Joel, I'll answer part of your question. They have only started doing any geotechnical and subsurface stuff on Star of the South in Victoria. And I think one other project that it was actually, no, they were going to move forward, and then they pulled the plug on the Novocastrian project. So there's one project so far that's getting any underwater work done at this point. So the challenge, frankly, in Australia has been that the developers want to be able to build the projects, but there's still not really the best regulatory framework in place for this. the approvals have come way too slow. They, part of a lot of the projects that were going to be built in Western Australia was going to be for powering hydrogen production. But then they're competing with, the Asian power hub or something that was supposed to be like 70 gigawatts of, onshore renewables, both wind and solar, that were going to also be leveraged for hydrogen production. So, the challenge for the Australian market is that they, as Rosie's saying, they have a lot of onshore renewables, wind, yes, but also solar resources left in the tank. So, unless they're actually seeing a huge spike in demand, or they find somebody that's going to do a lot of this hydrogen offtake, and they can justify building these mega projects for doing it, I think they're going to have a hard time with getting offshore in Australia kind of off the starting blocks.
Yeah, I think, Phil, I'd have to agree with you there a little bit because and my reasoning being, in the last year and a half, we've been talking about Australia with Rosemary for years, but we've done actual work down there. We've dealt with, not dealt with, we've engaged with some of the locals. We've worked with some of the operators. We've worked with some of the great people down there that are running wind farms. They're the engineers, the asset performance people, the developers, all the above, even the OEMs. And you can see some of the struggles that they run into just on land. With permitting and the local opposition and some things. And so you can hear the opposition to a lot of the wind projects there. And I gotta think that the permitting, they're going to have, regardless of technical issues, the just getting things through the government are going to be tough to get offshore wind built.
Are you worried about unexpected blade root failures and the high cost of repairs? Meet EcoPitch by Onyx Insight, the standard in blade root monitoring. Onyx's state-of-the-art sensor tracks blade root movement in real time, delivering continuous data to keep your wind farm running smoothly and efficiently. With EcoPitch, you can catch problems early, saving hundreds of thousands of dollars. Field tested on over 3,000 blades, it's proven reliability at your fingertips. Choose EcoPitch for peace of mind. Contact Onyx Insight today to schedule your demo of EcoPitch and experience the future of blade monitoring. Well, as wind progresses in Japan, offshore is a growing concept, but they've had trouble, right? Mitsubishi pulled out of 3 projects recently that they had bid on and won, but Japan is refusing to give up on offshore wind, and they are going to start planning a national floating wind test center next year, and that is going to help them get floating wind into Japan. So the Floating Offshore Wind Technology Research Association says that they're going to conduct verification tests in Japanese waters because their ocean and weather conditions differ from Europe. Obviously, there's a lot of knowledge in Europe for floating wind, not so much in Japan. And I guess from my perspective, just reading these articles about Japan taking on this effort, it does make sense because the way the continental shelf is right there off the coast of Japan, it pretty much gets into deep water very quickly. Floating wind is going to be a great opportunity, but there are unique challenges in Japan, right?
Yeah, I want to mirror this one almost to the conversation that we had with the fellows up in Norway and Denmark there about the Utsira Nord, right? Because we talked to them about, okay, Norway having the capabilities to do this. Do we want to be a net exporter of technology? Do we want to keep it at home? We know how to do stuff offshore, blah, 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 blah. Great things up there. This is kind of the same case, but around the world, right? Japan sitting over there, mostly by itself working on floating wind stuff. So it's difficult. I mean, a lot of Japanese companies have tried to get into offshore, merged, the MHI Vestas experiment and some of those other things. We did a big strike tape project on a bunch of Mitsubishi turbines onshore in the States this year. So the Japanese technology has been around the world, but I think that because of the national interest, right? Like they want offshore wind. They have good offshore wind resource. We've talked with quite a few people over there. They need to do something like this. The only other one place that there's an offshore wind test center, of course, we have like High Wind Scotland there that did that project, but there is another floating offshore like kind of test center in north of France, I think. where they're doing some studies and some other things. But them building this, because Japan has been a follow-on technology-wise for years. They've just been using whatever the Western world's been creating. And some Korean turbines, and we've run into some weird ones like that too, right? Some small production units. But I think that this one is very smart of them from a national interest standpoint to build this floating offshore technology center, because they're going to need it. If they want offshore wind, it's going to have to be floating in a big way over in Japan.
Yeah, Portugal's also got the Wind Float Atlantic, so there are, again, a number of pilot projects. Japan was actually the pioneer, though, with this. They had a 2-megawatt unit out on a floating platform since, I want to say, 2011 or 2012. Their government needs to get out of their own way if they really want to move forward with floating offshore in a serious way. The fact that they're willing to commit some resources to this is good, because they're leveraging expertise as well from, commercial relationships with some of the other, floating research centers around the world, including Norway, according to this press release announcing this. So, in general, that's a good thing, but all it takes is somebody saying yes at this point. And, there's been a lot of people pushing for this for a long time, both in Japan and in the West, who want to be, in Japan, including turbine OEMs, developers, financiers, you name it. The government needs to, get out of its own way and let some of this start to flourish.
All right, the wind farm of the week this week, we're taking a plane trip across the Atlantic to Moray West, which is an Ocean Winds project. Ocean Winds is EDPR and NG. So on this offshore wind farm is 60 Siemens Gamesa's SG14222 direct drive turbines, each rated at 14.7 megawatts. These things have the big 108-meter power boost blades on them, which are just massive, 108 meters long for each blade. So the cool thing about this wind farm, and they're doing something a little bit different, because we have spoke about a lot of these offshore wind auctions and how the CFDs are working in the UK, and some of the interest or disinterest in the Danish auctions and German auctions, and support for the actual financing and operators. They did something a little bit different on this one. It's a hybrid financial structuring model for offtake, which is pretty cool. So unlike most UK offshore wind farms that rely entirely on CFDs, Moray West has 882 megawatts. It splits it into 3 buckets. 294 megawatts are under a government UK CFD. 573 megawatts are under big tech PPAs with Amazon and Google. And then a little bit of it is in the merchant markets. So that hybrid model had secured them £2 billion in financing. So it's a bit of a different way to do things, right, when they're building this up. So they brought a lot of support to the local economies there up in Scotland. So Port of Nig, the Port of Invergordon, the Key West there. So they had some marshalling areas and pre-assembly areas, some local North Sea vessels from Cadeler to help install. And all of this translated. So the cool hybrid model, the financing that was there, and all of the support locally had some rapid project delivery. So they were able to first secure the consent in 2019, and they delivered first power in July of 24 and full power output by 25. So for an offshore wind project going from consent to full power in under 6 years, pretty impressive. So this project, local economic impact, is expected to inject £800 million into the Scottish economy, with over 1,500 full-time employee years of construction jobs and 60-plus long-term operational roles based in Buckie. So it really demonstrates how offshore wind can support energy transition and regional economic development amid some supply chain and grid infrastructure challenges. So the Moray West wind farm up there in Scotland, you are our wind farm of the week.
Well, that wraps up another episode of the Uptime Wind Energy Podcast. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate all the feedback and support we receive from the wind industry. If today's discussion sparked any questions or ideas, we'd love to hear from you. Just reach out to us on LinkedIn. And please don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. For Joel, Rosemary, and Phil, I'm Alan Hall, and we'll catch you next week on the Uptime Wind Energy Podcast.